Welcome to our seminar, Workforce Motivation. This seminar series is hosted by the University of the West Indies Mona Western Jamaica Campus UWI Mona WJC, located in the resilient city of Montego Bay, Jamaica. My name is Patrick Prendergast, and as campus director, I extend appreciation on behalf of the team to you and your colleagues for participating in this seminar. As a university campus, we believe in engaging our various publics in discussions that are timely, relevant, and enlightening. And especially during these unprecedented times of the COVID-19 pandemic, with its many challenges, its many uncertainties, unparalleled opportunities, we feel there is an even greater need for dialogue, for communication, for continued effort at developing an understanding of the transformation that's taking place in our world. There is no denying that the workforce has been under severe stress throughout this period. But for us, it is not just okay to say that the stress is expected. We must also speak to how to treat with the shifts that are taking place, to help each other develop strategies for coping and to deepen our resolve to overcome no matter the adversity. So in this particular seminar, we want to look at motivation of our employees. And to do that, we have invited senior lecturer in the Department of Sociology, Psychology, and Social Work at the University of the West Indies Mona campus, Dr. Marina Ramkissoon, to engage with you. She will address the specific topic, what motivates employees before, during, and after COVID-19. But before I formally introduce Dr. Ramkissoon, let me, on behalf of the UWI Mona Western Jamaica campus, express our deepest gratitude to her for doing this seminar today. It is one that is dear to our hearts, and we hope that you will find it insightful and instructive. Affectionately called Marina, Dr. Ramkissoon is an avid student of applied behavioral sciences. Since completing her PhD in 2015, which focused on how defensiveness impacts learning in an organization, she has become a certified radical collaboration trainer and an authorized user of the Leadership Development Profile Assessment. Marina is also a trained user of organizational culture assessment tools and has designed her own culture audit instrument and methodology for use in the Caribbean space. Further, in terms of her practice, she has developed a leadership learning lab which can be utilized by management teams for introspection and performance improvements. All of this has been made possible through a long career as an educator. Marina has spent approximately 20 years teaching undergraduates and graduates at the UWI, focusing on social psychology, work motivation, organizational learning, and applied behavioral sciences, and has taught thousands of students over the years. As a student of sociology and psychology, Marina has also been instrumental in the growth and development of the Caribbean Journal of Psychology, the premier peer-reviewed academic journal in psychology in the English-speaking Caribbean. Whatever Marina is engaged in gets her full attention, and her personal creed is to always act in the spirit of improving a situation. This is what these seminars are about. Seminars are about improving a situation. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Marina Ramkissoon.
Hi, everybody. Marina here. Thanks for being here. Welcome to this talk on motivation, what motivates you, what motivates your employees, and we're going to focus on before, during, and after COVID. I'm really grateful for this opportunity, and I do hope that you will get useful tips and knowledge out of this session. Motivation is something that we can all relate to. We have our stories about motivation, and some of them good, some of them bad. We can all relate to this topic, and even though it's not fashionable, we find it very, very important. HRD professionals must understand that motivation is a part of the productivity game. It is a part of performance, and therefore, even though it's not fashionable, it's not going to go away. We have to look at it. So welcome again, and thank you very much for being here. Let's get started. So today I want to focus this talk on 4 basic points. I'm going to start off with the very basic principles of motivation. Then I'm going to introduce you to 2 models of motivation, which I find kind of easy to use to help describe what motivation is. Then I'm going to focus on describing what the old normal was. So what the universe of motivation was in the workplace before COVID. Then, of course, we're going to spend some time talking about COVID itself and what it has introduced, how it has changed the landscape of work, the impact it has had on all of us, employers and employees included. And we're going to end with a discussion of imagining what the new normal would look like, what the strategies could be, and what could possibly help employers to keep their employees motivated during a difficult time through the transition and towards the end in terms of what comes after. All right, so in a nutshell, there are some takeaways that I'd like you to get out of this session. It is important, number 1, to design your context. So the workplace is a context, and you should be able to examine it and to design the experience of work. COVID provides one context. Context is always important. You must look at motivation, not just from the individual's perspective, but from the context perspective as well, and how they overlap. Related to that is the second takeaway. Motivation is shared responsibility. It is not just up to the employer. It is not just up to the employee. It must be that everyone takes part in and plays their role in creating motivation, in increasing motivation. So motivation requires shared responsibility. Another takeaway that I'd like to reinforce is that motivation does not equal performance. However, you can't do without it. So persons ask, why is it necessary to have a motivated workforce? It doesn't always lead to outcomes, that's true. But without motivation, you'll have a very hard time achieving your outcomes. So that's the third takeaway. And the fourth takeaway is that you must assess. You must know your employees, you must know yourself, and you must understand the motivation profile of the persons in your workforce. So let's get going with the basics. I'd like to just cover some basics, 4 of them specifically, in terms of what motivation is. So persons always ask, well, what does a motivated employee look like? This person initiates action. A motivated person will get going, they will start, and they will initiate action. They also, after initiating the action, focus their attention and direct themselves towards goals. So the motivated person will start and they will move towards a particular goal. They also sustain their effort. You will find them persisting in their activities. And finally, because of all of that, the motivated person is likely to follow through. They're likely to complete the task. So what does a motivated person look like? They start. They get going, they put in the effort, they focus, they sustain their effort, and they get the job done most of the time. But as I said, and reinforcing the point, motivation is not performance. So there are many factors that focus on and contribute to the motivation levels vary. They vary moment to moment. They vary by time period. They vary by demographics, by context, of course. So your wants, needs, your desires, your interests, your goals, they change with you, they change over time. And obviously, therefore, no one solution fits in terms of increasing motivation. The motivation varies. Then our third principle is that, again, reinforcing the point, responsibility for motivation is shared. Motivating yourself, motivating the team, motivating your teammate, your colleague, motivating the leader even, motivating the entire workforce. It's not all the same. Some of the same principles may apply, but in terms of how you go about it, it requires a certain set of activities. And therefore, it is shared responsibility. I can be responsible for my own motivation as an employer, as an employee, but there are persons who are responsible for creating a motivating environment, facilitating the environment that leads to persons wanting to be there, wanting to be motivated, wanting to push as hard as they can. So there is no one person responsible for motivation, and controlling motivation is not up to one person only. Yes, you have responsibility for yourself, but it is a shared activity. Basic principle number 4, drilling down into the context. So I'd like to think about motivation in terms of context, the individual and the context working together to understand motivation profiles. So when we talk about context, the structure of the organization, the type of organization, the different types of work, the society, the leadership style, compensation packages, the sector or the industry that you're in, the physical space and layout of the workplace, the organization's culture, the type of work activity, whether it is easily quantified or not, whether it's intellectual work, whether it's service work, the type of employment. It could be casual work, it could be consultancy, professional work, it could be a routinized day-to-day work. All of these things relate to the context in terms of how motivation is understood. And therefore, the fourth principle is that motivation must involve an understanding of the context that you're in so that you can appreciate what is impacting the feeling of motivation. Now, obviously, and we'll get into this a little more, one of the things that has been introduced in terms of context is work from home. So COVID has led to a change in context. Work from home now is the new normal for some persons, and that definitely has had an impact. So persons have had to engage in shift work, they have staggered hours, or they come into work 3 days for the week. You also have a shift and change in your physical workplace. You now have different ways of working. So you're working more online, you're working more in terms of virtual meetings, etc. So the context has changed, and you must expect that the motivation has changed with it. Now let me get to the 2 models that I spoke about before. Some people find it difficult to understand the theoretical terms associated with motivation, and it's not my intention to go through theories of motivation in this session, trying to make it as practical as possible. So I came up with 2 models that I think might be useful for persons who just want to simplify. Theorists, please forgive me, because I might do some violation to the violence, as they say, to the theories. One of the models I'm just suggesting would be useful and might use as a guide throughout this talk is what I call HWL. HWL, H, have to, and need to. In terms of motivation, there can be a feeling that one has to do something, one needs to do something because of a negative consequence. This is I must do it. The sentiment is that I must do it or else something is going to happen that I don't want. And therefore, it is a feeling of compliance. It's a feeling of survival. It's a feeling of force. It's a feeling of restriction and requirements. So in the workplace, we might be feeling that there are some things that I have to do. Then you can move on to the W. There are things that we want to do. This might characterize actually the bulk of motivation in the workplace. So there are some things that we want to do because they are aligned with our values, because we understand why it's important to do it. We appreciate that this contributes to the bottom line. We are okay with doing it. We endorse activity. We see value in it, and we want to do it. So hopefully, most of our work is characterized by we want to. So there is have to and need to, which implies and feels like force. And then there is want to, which is, I'm on board with this and this is okay for me. Then we have the L part, which is love to. I love doing this. I am happy, I'm fulfilled, this is awesome, I'm interested, I'd do it if I didn't get paid. I love to do this, I'm fully on board. It's not often that our jobs are characterized by, I love to do this. Everything in the job I love to do, I would choose to do it. This is my dream job, but it's quite possible. And it's also very likely that much of our work involves have tos, want to, and love to. And I'm suggesting that if you want an easy way to describe motivation, you can use HWL, have to or need to, want to, and love to. The second one is related to, or before I get to the second one, what are the benefits of the HWL model? So one, it helps you to diagnose. If you talk to someone and they said that most of their job is characterized by have tos, I feel like I have to, and I just need to get this done. I must do it or else. If you have that kind of situation, then you have a problem. So that's one of the benefits. It can help you to diagnose very quickly. And the other benefit is that you can help someone to transition along. So moving from, boy, I must do this, to, yeah, I understand why we need to do this and I'm on board. And then I love this. It's not necessarily going to be the same activity, but there can be some transition when persons buy into the rationale for certain activities, even if they, first of all, resisted the activity. So that's HWL. And then let's look at the other one. So I'm suggesting as well that if you want to talk about motivation, you can use the engine analogy. Now, don't know that much about cars, but let's start from the beginning here. Internally, you do. You're an individual, you act, you behave, and you do things. Now I'm saying that you can be the engine, just like in a car. So your motor is what revs up. Your motor is what gets the activity going. Now, in terms of motivation and in terms of a vehicle, you need to have a spark. So this is where initiating comes in. So just like the ignition, to get your motor going, you need to have a spark. Something needs to cause that initiation of action in you. Otherwise, you'll just be dormant, you'll just be parked, you're staying right there. In terms of what creates the spark, it's your mind and your body. So as a driver, you have to be prepared to have that spark initiated. So what is it about what's going on in your body, your feelings, your state of health, what's going on in your mind in terms of what you want, what you need, what your intentions are, what's going on with the driver, so that you're ready for that spark in order to move. Then finally, you have the environment. So the workplace can be like the vehicle itself and the transportation system. These are all the environmental factors. And what we're suggesting here in this approach, the engine analogy, is that the environment has to have the facilitators. It has to remove the debilitators. It has to be aligned with your mind and your body. It has to nourish your mind and your body. It has to cause the ignition, turn the ignition switch. It has to initiate behavior, and then you get going. Your engine gets going. Your internal motivation system starts to click. And therefore, when you're talking about motivating an individual from outside to inside, there are factors in the environment. The car and the environment and the road system must all be set up to facilitate the driver, who is the employee, who has his own mind and body, that must be ready and prepared and in a good state in order to enter into that drive. And then you must have that spark. There are things that will initiate action, create the spark, so that your internal engine can get going and you can feel motivation and therefore act. So both of these, the car goes, you go, and it means that all of it is aligned. Now, you know when everything is not working well together, you have a chance of breaking down. Similarly with the person, if not all of the factors are aligned, then you won't necessarily be running at your full potential. So what I'm suggesting is, if you want an easy way to describe motivation, you can use HWL, or you can use the car analogy. So have to and need to, want to and love to, or, we have to have everything right in terms of the environment, everything in terms of the driver, everything in terms of what creates that spark that gets you going, and then you're gone in terms of your engine. I hope that was useful to you. Now let's talk a little bit more about the old normal, what used to be our universe of motivation. To do this, I tried to make it a little more relatable so that we can talk about different motivation profiles. So let's talk about a few persons hypothetically. Employers, employees, give them some names and understand a bit more about what their normal looked like before COVID. So we talk about Karl, Carla, Simone, Sandra, Anthony, and Stephen. So let's take Carla. Carla is an employer. We're putting her in that role. She's an executive director. We put her in a profit company, for-profit company, service company in Jamaica. So she is on the top level. Now, what revs Carla's engine? For Karla, her loves are leading. She is motivated, driven by, she loves engaging with her staff. She loves excelling. She loves to surpass her competitors. So what gets her going is when she has success. Success breeds success, and she initiates more and more projects in order to keep herself motivated. For Karla, she loves to mentor. She loves and she feels a sense of fulfillment out of this. She also loves and appreciates being appreciated and recognized for her leadership skills. So we talk about the employer whose universe used to be and whose normal used to be one where she felt motivated by leadership position, mentorship, innovating, surpassing her competitors. What about her have-tos? You can still have some have-tos even though you're a top executive. So for Karla, she did not necessarily like dealing with a headstrong board. And we can also say, for example, it's all hypothetical, that one of her have-tos was that she didn't necessarily like being in the public eye. So for her job, there were some things that weren't necessarily facilitating motivation, but she had to do it. She had to engage because it's just what the job required. So dealing with a headstrong board and being in the public eye. Also, Carla is not into figures, so she didn't necessarily revel in the reviewing of financial statements. So Carla's profile, an executive director, motivated highly by competition as well as mentorship and leadership and success, and not so thrilled about the feeling that she has to be in the public eye, the feeling that she has to deal with certain members of the board and these financial statements. Some people can relate to that profile. That's what their world looked like pre-COVID. Anthony is a high school principal. Anthony, what initiates him, what gets his spark going is the success of his students. He has a strong civic interest and wants to give back to the society through education. Anthony is also motivated by cooperation from the teachers. The dedication they show inspires him, and he has built confidence over time in his leadership because he has gotten reward for it and he's gotten recognition for it over the years. So Anthony's loves are easy to understand. What he doesn't appreciate so much, his have to, is that he has to go into a particular community. The school is located in a violence-prone area, and therefore he has to deal with that in order to get his job done. Anthony also doesn't necessarily like the procurement process that he has to go through, and this is a have to. He has to do it, but not really interested. So that's Anthony in a nutshell. Let's look at the employee side. So we have Karl. Karl works in Carla's company. So he is a customer service agent in the firm that Karla leads. Now, Karl's engine is sparked by recognition. He has received Employee of the Month twice. Karl's firm also gives out small bonuses when he gets these high feedback scores in terms of client satisfaction. He's very motivated by that. He loves that feeling. And Karl, however, doesn't like the physical space. He's more of an introvert, and he would prefer to have his own office as a customer service agent, which is perhaps unlikely in most cases. Karl's have-tos also include the shift system. So sometimes he has to commute to work. It takes him about an hour. He has to do this. It's not necessarily motivating, but he'll do it anyway to get the job done. He doesn't have a car. How has our motivation universe been changed by COVID? There are several factors that I'd like to discuss. First of all, first factor, this applies to everyone. We're talking about employers, employees. COVID has introduced fear, anxiety, and threat into the workspace, into the context. Because of this, our have-tos have changed. We now have to protect ourselves and our family. We now have to put health and safety first. I have to be responsible in a different way. I have many questions about what is happening, and they tend to lead to me being anxious. I feel afraid about what's going to come. I feel as if work is no longer important. I have many questions about my health and safety. I fear that I'm going to get this disease. I don't know what this disease is going to bring, especially if I am one who has comorbidities, especially if I am vulnerable in terms of the age bracket. I don't know what is going to happen if I get it, what it looks like. I am uncertain as to what transmission media exists. I don't know. Am I supposed to wear a mask? Am I supposed to adhere to 6 feet, 3 feet? Is it okay to be in a crowded space? And remember, I'm talking about early stages when COVID came in. We're getting more information now, and there's more clarity. But as COVID hit, fear, anxiety, and threat, many questions, and therefore you as an employee, you as an employer, now faced with things that you have to do that you didn't have to do before. And it would be obvious that your focus, your drive, your determination to achieve, to do your work as you normally would, has to shift. You now have to focus on other things. Now, for the employers, your have-tos, what changed for you? There is added burden. In addition to the general health and safety concerns for you and your family as a person, you as a leader, you as a person in charge, your added burden, what you have to now do very quickly is to keep the business going. You have to meet targets still. We can't go bankrupt. You have to care for the health and safety of your staff, not just for yourself and your family. You have to think about pivoting. You have to think about cash flow. You have to think about supplies being disrupted. And so many employers jumped into crisis management mode. They have to do this because you're faced with an unprecedented crisis. And so the motivation to do, your engine is revving still, but it is focused on in a different direction. Remember, we say motivated people initiate. Well, they initiate and they direct. Well, you have to get involved in other activities now and shift from productivity, shift from performance, focus on the practicalities that COVID has brought as an employer. So the first point is that COVID has brought fear, it has brought anxiety, it has brought threat, and the impact really for everybody is that you're now distracted from work. You have lower productivity, there's focus on attention elsewhere, your have-tos have changed, your love-to has to take a backseat to some extent, especially as COVID started off, and so you're likely to be off target in terms of what you had set out to do at work. COVID has also brought uncertainty for sure. This is the second point. So both employers and employees faced with uncertainty. So again, some of the same questions that came up in terms of health. The employer has to figure out, well, I'm uncertain about what this new virus is going to bring. Does this mean that I have to close for 3 months? Does this mean that I have to have testing in my workplace when we reopen? Does this mean that I have to have the face shields and the plexiglass? And do we have a mask policy? Do we have to have masks at all times? In addition, not just the health protocols, but in uncertainty in terms of delays. So projects might not be able to be started. You might have to suspend certain activities and you're not sure when you're going to resume them. You may not be able to offer all of the services that you had before. Decision-making becomes more difficult. Prioritization becomes more difficult, apart from the health and safety concerns. The uncertainty in terms of the wider economy, the curfews, all of the changes that are now creating a shift. Uncertainty breeds a lot of fear and anxiety, but definitely the uncertainty itself has disrupted the workplace and has caused employers to really, to some extent, be stalled in some cases. Most persons don't like disruption, and persons would be craving to go back to the new norm, to the normal, craving to go back to a case where we can be certain as to what is going to happen on a daily basis. Now, uncertainty also takes its toll mentally and emotionally. Employees' livelihood threatened, Many questions, no answers. What exactly am I going to do if I'm going to get laid off? How long is it going to be for? Am I going to be able to pay my bills? Am I going to get a moratorium for my loan? How am I going to manage my children at home when schools are closed? If I have to work at home, then how am I going to manage all of this? The uncertainty brings with it the disruption, the distraction, the delays, the stalling, the halting of projects, stopping and preventing things from going forward, and creates its own havoc. Related to this, of course, is the change that comes to deal with the uncertainty and the threats. So this is another factor that COVID has introduced into the workplace. Change, a lot of change. We know as a rule of thumb, people are uncomfortable with change. I don't want to use the word resist. And then with that change comes broken alignments. So work from home is one of the major changes. So disruption in routines, expectations. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be at work at 8:30 anymore, because definitely you're asking me to come to some meetings that end 9 o'clock at night when they didn't normally do so. So where are the boundaries? What kind of change is this? Have you introduced to me now that I have to be on call 24/7 just because we don't have a physical workspace? How am I to manage the schooling of my children, my elderly parents, as well as work from the same space? How am I to do it without a proper internet connection, without a device that works? My new way of working is that I have to be at Zoom meetings. Now, what does this mean in terms of my technological abilities? What happens to the things I used to love to do now that you are causing me to have to adapt to all of this change very quickly? Now, when I said there is broken alignment, there are some persons who have been reconsidering what they do at work based on the fact that COVID has now caused them to stop and think. They're reevaluating, and they may not be on the same page as they were before in terms of work. So why am I doing all of this again? Why am I in this job? Why do I focus too much on work, or should I be thinking of a shift? There's likely to be some broken alignments with you and your organization in terms of the values that you uphold, in terms of how you want to live your life, in terms of what is now important. So change caused by the disruption and broken alignment that you would have to mend in terms of getting back to a new normal. The fourth thing that COVID has obviously introduced, stress and burnout. Having to adapt quickly, difficult challenges. So many teachers have been complaining. You have to now deal with the same amount of work, which has been amplified because of the use of technology that you're not familiar with. You have to now pivot. That's what people have been saying. You have to become more agile. These are pressures for the leaders. And that trickle down to the employees. A lot of stress and burnout that is in addition to the anxiety and the fear that's created out of uncertainty. Now, you definitely will have more of this if there is lack of structure in the workplace, and with more uncertainty and looming over your head, the possibility of redundancy, the possibility of a pay cut. These things are now introduced by this disease. The fifth thing that COVID has introduced, on the positive side, opportunity, innovation, ability, not ability, but the opportunity to be creative. So the silver lining, I can now go online to teach if I wanted to from before and didn't have the opportunity. I like to engage with technology. So let me now try my hand at recording my lectures. Let me now try to prepare some fancy looking slides. Let me try to have a Zoom meeting with 10 of my colleagues. Let me think about a new business model. Let me think about the same HR officer who has to do workshops, but taping them and having interactive sessions and using polls and using feedback sessions in an online format. Let me try my hand at that. You have now given me this opportunity, COVID. So I want to launch off into it. Persons who want to work from home. So this is an opportunity now to spend more time with their families, and therefore they have a little more balance than they would have had before. So COVID has introduced quite a bit of negative, but there is also positive in the sense that opportunities have been created. So some persons will get to nurture their want tos and their love tos. And it doesn't all have to be about what they have to now do differently, which is forcing them and causing them to comply. The last thing that I'd want to highlight that COVID has introduced is the focus on societal inequality. So there is no doubt that we have been made more aware of the divides in the society, societal inequalities and disadvantage. It sheds light on gender differences in terms of who has to spend more time at home and who takes the responsibility for rearing the children and their schooling, who takes more responsibility for the elderly, the divides in terms of health, so persons who have comorbidities now at a disadvantage and have to be treated with more care as before. Yes, it was important, but the disadvantage is highlighted. The digital divide disadvantage is highlighted for our students, for our workers who don't necessarily have the equipment and who live in far areas where you don't have the internet access as strongly as you would in the town areas. The socioeconomic status differences, those are highlighted. Some persons are getting left behind, and COVID has definitely demonstrated that inequalities do exist even if we paid little or not as much attention as we should have before. So in summary, what has COVID introduced? The fear, anxiety, and threat. It has introduced and those distract us and create new have-tos. The uncertainty that has led to crisis management, stalling of projects, delays, disruption, and also people not being able to move forward with things that they would have planned for and not being able to say to their staff even when things are going to get back on stream. So a lot of uncertainty. With this uncertainty comes the change and the reevaluation sometimes of what you are doing. Definitely disruption in routines, definitely disruption in what was comfortable. In addition to that, it has brought stress and burnout and exacerbation of the inequalities. And the silver lining, it has brought opportunity, it has brought a chance for innovation, it has brought a chance for new business models and new thinking, reimagining, and the opportunity to be creative. So then what do you do? Humans are nothing if not resilient, and we have weathered the storm so far. Jamaica has done quite well in terms of managing COVID. The workplace has to some extent, some might describe it as staying stable. So yes, you have had some redundancies. Yes, you have had some places not going so well, but overall you can say that the economy is bouncing back and some companies are also along for that ride. So we are resilient. We've been faced with the issue, still in transition mode, and we're coming closer to the after, not forgetting that it could be months and years before we fully recover, but we are resilient. So what now? What of the transition, and what is this new normal, and what does motivation look like in this situation? So what I'm suggesting, and I'm ending with this segment, the strategies and the tips. Turning the have-tos and the want turning the have tos into want to and love to. So the things that you're forced to do, things you're required to, how can we make them more appealing? How can we get people to be bought into the behavior change, for example, the health protocols? How do we get persons to be more satisfied and okay with the fact that they have to work from home if they are not? How can we get persons to nurture the things that they used to love, which are not necessarily present in the same way, but getting back to the point where you love the work that you did, you're on board, you're endorsing the work, and you have similar levels of motivation before that you had from before COVID and afterwards. So take, for example, work from home. Some persons like it, some persons don't. I would suggest that companies now and employers now take the time to understand the motivation profile of their staff, try to talk to their employees, get an understanding of what's going on with them in terms of what they feel they have to do, what they want to do, what they would like to do, what they love to do, and how that has changed. And then you can understand what you may have to put in place if there is a motivation challenge that is discovered from the assessments. In terms of work from work, there are persons who have to return to work during COVID, and because of the fears and anxieties of what is required to be in a space where you're not sure about disease and transmission, the ideas about protecting themselves are still there and protecting their families. So to ensure that persons are not demotivated by the fact that they have to go back to work, the encouragement to employers is to ensure that you have the right health and safety protocols in place. Assure your staff that their safety is your concern, and you can allay to some extent the fears and allow for flexibility, as well as when there's a chance of a person getting ill or there's a suspicion of being ill, allow flexibility so that the person can take care of himself and therefore also protect your staff. So there is work from home, there is work from work under COVID conditions, and the interest there is to turn what you feel you have to do into something that you want to do and love to do with various strategies. Now, let us take, for example, you have a couple companies that have appeared in the newspaper in recent times, places like Kingston Wharves and Seprod. And even though you have to deal with the situation, what they've done is, for example, put resources in place, offer training, focus on planning ahead, and offer flexibility. So companies are actually doing these things. You can also have work from home policies that are clearly outlined. In addition to this, you need a communication and change management plan and action plan in order to ensure staff understands what's going on and appreciates what the change does and how it impacts the company and how it impacts them, and they are supported through the process. Then you also need to have a business continuity plan that helps you with the anticipation of what is to come, and again, to inform your employees so that they feel included. And all of this will help you to return to a normal sooner than later by formalizing a new culture. So what would have been missing in terms of the structure that was taken away with the introduction of uncertainty and the fears that come from it, you're trying to reestablish structure by having these plans, the work from home policy, the business continuity plan, the communication and change management plans. All of these will help you to reestablish the new normal, and also to ensure staff is well informed and maintain a relationship with your organization, so you regain what you may have lost in terms of that alignment that might have gone awry. And you continue to build a culture in a new situation. Then you also have the example of Unicoma in the news, and that news report said that there were some layoffs, but the company also offered financial support, telemedicine, psychological services, nutritionists, and ensured that health and safety protocols were present for persons who had to return to work. So these are practical suggestions that you can implement to treat with the fears, to treat with the uncertainty, to treat with the change that is to come and has come from COVID. There are some persons who love to socialize at work, socialize in a good way. They love to work with their teammates. They love to have that camaraderie. And you can possibly think about introducing some virtual meetings, doing some check-ins, having some social support groups online, continuing with your recognition and appreciation in a team setting or a workplace setting where everybody is involved. And the idea here is to recreate the inclusion that they would have had from before so that it becomes familiar again and becomes something that they enjoy about the job and the workplace. Because some persons find it very isolating to be at home, away from work. Wrapping up now, the strategies in a nutshell: reduce the burden of the new have-tos that have been introduced by COVID, provide relief from anxiety about health concerns with the proper protocols in place, reduce the uncertainty about what do I do now at work by explaining what the new routines and procedures are, reinforcing the goals and restating some of the goals now for what I'm to accomplish at work, set the proper work from home policies and make them very clear, communicate them constantly and very clearly, introduce your change management implementation plan so that the change is managed smoothly and properly. Ensure that staff who feel excluded and isolated are brought back into the fold so that they can realign themselves with what they used to love about their workplace. Try to facilitate support as much as possible in terms of the resources, in terms of things that people are now focused on and distracted by so that they can get back to the work that is important, so they can get back to their want tos and they can get back to their love tos. Facilitate innovation and creativity, take advantage of the opportunities, pull out of your staff who have for long wanted to try their hand at different things. Utilize the opportunities to be innovative and creative, allow for flexibility and autonomy. Always continue to recognize and appreciate staff individually and in terms of the teams. Take risks is one of the things that I would encourage you to consider as an employer. Take your staff with you when you are taking these risks so it becomes exciting, so that engine is ignited, persons are on board, they're together with you. It's a difficult time, but it helps you to not be so distracted by the negatives and focusing on, yes, we can be a different company and we can do it together, and I'm all on board with you because you're taking care of me and you're providing me with opportunities out of the crisis. Lastly, in terms of your personal motivation, both employer and employee, I encourage you to assess your own self, do your own motivation profile. What are the things that you feel you have to do? What are the things that you want to do? What are the things you love to? And examine how these have changed. Examine how you can find balance and examine how you can nurture the things that you love to do, or make the things that you now have to do into things that you want to do and can learn to adapt to what is being required to make it important and valuable. Reevaluate how much you would have been doing before if you were a person who would have been stressed out and working all the time. It is an opportunity for you to think about the other things that motivate you and to have a more balanced life. Take care of that driver, maintain the car, take away the debilitating factors, facilitate the facilitators, nurture the facilitators. For some persons, challenging yourself can be that facilitator to ignite the spark, things that really will get you going and keep you on track. You want to sustain effort in these areas. You might have an opportunity now to do more of that, as opposed to what you used to do in the old universe. Build confidence in new skills, learn new things, get involved in training, and find ways to create a new normal that nurtures the things that you love to do. As I conclude, I'd like to say that, as I said it earlier, even though motivation may not be fashionable in the management literature right now, many other things are, taking prominence and are highlighted. Motivation does not go away, however, as an important factor, and it must always be considered. As HRD professionals, and I consider myself to be one of those, our jobs is to nurture the spark. Our job is to help the company and help the individual, help the client to facilitate the ignition of your motivation, of that motor, initiating actions where you want to get persons to. And again, my personal philosophy is once you get that engine going, once an individual is committed to that part of themselves and that pathway, then there's almost no stopping them. So it doesn't depend on somebody to always ignite for them or initiate action from outside. You can get your engine running and the company can facilitate your engine running, and then you're gone towards the path of whatever you're trying to accomplish. So in conclusion, motivation does not go away. It does not mean that you automatically perform, but if you understand the motivation profile and you understand yourself, you can know what you have to do, what you want to do, and what you love to do, and appreciate how they all work together in terms of increasing your motivation and ultimately your productivity. So I thank you very much for listening and for having me. I really hope this has been useful. If you have found this useful and you want to get a more comprehensive understanding of work motivation, I teach a course at the graduate level on work motivation, psychology of work motivation this semester, and it may be possible for you to enroll as a specially admitted student for the semester. Don't have to be a part of a full-blown program, but it is possible for you to join me for 13 weeks as we delve much deeper into the theoretical side of things, but always tying it back to the practical so that we can see motivation in action. I thank you and appreciate the time and look forward to the discussion. Thanks. Hello and good afternoon. Thank you for staying with me for the long haul. I hope you found it interesting. We've been at this for about an hour now, and I'd like to close off by addressing some of the questions that I have seen from the YouTube chat group. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to answer the questions as they were being asked, but let me address them now. So again, thank you for being here for the long haul, and let's look at the questions. So Dr. Prendergrass was asking, work from home is a new normal. What would be the main motivation issue to deal with this context? So really, my answer to that is that your goals would have had to be affected and adjusted. It is important to understand how fear can motivate, how anxiety can motivate, and how they can shift you from what you used to focus on in terms of what you needed to achieve. So one of the main motivation issues is the fact that you're now motivated more by fear, motivated more by anxiety, motivated less by the goals that you would have had. So it would have an impact in terms of achievement, and it would have an impact in terms of the bottom line. This can be temporary if you can manage anxiety and if you can manage fear by giving consistent information, giving accurate information, allaying fears, providing support, then those can subside and then persons can move back into what they love to do. Then Prof. Skoberg is engaging here and she is posing some interesting points and some questions. So I appreciate that, Prof. Skoberg. You're saying here, let me take a look, that there is room for us to look at different levels of analysis. And I would really, really love to get involved in a research project on a broad scale, the national level, both public and private sector, in terms of understanding more the different types of organizations and the different factors that motivate us. Again, looking at the old universe and now looking at what COVID has introduced and what is to come. So I completely agree with the disaggregation and the different levels of analysis. I also see here the question about commitment and loyalty and participation. When you get into the motivation literature, it can get quite fuzzy in terms of defining the terms. So many theories will give you different conceptualizations of what motivation involves and what it is defined as. I would associate commitment, loyalty, and participation more with the concept of employee engagement. Again, it's not synonymous with motivation. When you think of an engaged employee, this is more of a relationship with the organization. So you feel quite attached to, you feel loyal to, you feel like you want to participate because you're engaged with the value. On a personal level, you are aligned with what the organization is doing and the organization's value. So engagement fits quite well with those concepts. Then we also have the aim to determine what motivates them to join the service. They were motivated not to answer the survey questions. The research died a natural death. One of the things I'd like to see us do differently when we do research on these human factors is to utilize mixed methodology. So the very early study that persons quote constantly from Ken Carter, why workers don't work, outdated a bit now, but the methodology was good. So they used both the quantitative and the qualitative. And when you do a culture audit, when you do a motivation profile, you really have to get in there and you have to get to know persons. You have to understand what's going on with them, listen to what they're saying and what they're not saying, so that you can tap into the truth about the motivation. All right, let's look again here. Hi, Susheta. Hi, Jessica. Thanks, Claudette. Thanks, Prof. I don't see any more questions. I see the comment about an attempt could always be made. I do not like tooth extraction. Okay, yes. Studying motivation is important. Studying the organizational context in the Caribbean is important. We have many stories about things being painful, many stories about outdated models, old forms of leadership styles, and the bureaucracy that comes with the old styles thinking about motivation and control, command and control. I will perhaps close here, not to extend any further, by just reinforcing the point that as HRD professionals, we have to be convinced ourselves that a motivated and engaged workforce is quite possible. People need their spark to be ignited. And once you're ignited, nobody can stop you. It can happen for anybody, any form of employee, self-employed, whatever. All of us have it within us to be, to initiate that spark and to get going. External rewards are great, but once the internal engine is running, you're gone clear. I thank you very much for being here and for the participation. And I hope if I have another session that you will join me. So take care. Thank you very much. Thanks, WJC, and all the best. Stay safe. Bye.